But it should be known that the atmospheres, arising from the Son of heaven, which is the Lord, properly speaking, are not three but six. There are three above the Son of the world, and there are three below it. The three below the Son of the world constantly accompany the three natural atmospheres, and enable a man in the natural world to think and to feel. For the atmospheres arising from the Son of the world have not life in themselves, because they originate from a sun which is pure fire. But the atmospheres arising from the Son of heaven, which is the Lord, have life in themselves, because they originate in the Son, which is pure love and pure wisdom. The atmospheres which originate from the Son of the world, which is pure fire, cause those things on the earth and in the human body to subsist and be held together in connection, and they are not changed except according to the laws of natural order. Hence is the difference between things in the natural world and in the spiritual world, concerning which difference more will be said in what follows. That in the spiritual world, which is above the natural world, there are also atmospheres, is evident from the light and heat there, which before the eyes and senses of the angels appear similar to the light and heat before the eyes and senses of men. And angels are spiritual, but men are natural, and there cannot possibly be any light and heat with their differences without atmospheres. That there are also spiritual atmospheres is evident from many appearances in the spiritual world, as from the appearance of colors there, of meteors, of clouds both thin and thick, of winds, of gravities, pressures, and consequent consistencies, which although they appear entirely similar to such things as are in the natural world, nevertheless they are spiritual and not natural. Although before the angels, because they are spiritual, they appear similar. That there are spiritual atmospheres is evident especially from the respiration of angels and spirits. For angels and spirits breathe in like manner as men in the world. But angels breathe from their atmospheres, and men from theirs. The angels in the celestial kingdom breathe from their atmosphere which is more pure, but the angels of the spiritual kingdom breathe from their atmosphere which is less pure. But the things which we have hitherto said concerning degrees and atmospheres are for the most part theoretical, but all theoretical things should be drawn and concluded from the facts of experience, and also be confirmed by them. For unless the facts of experience, as it were, lead the hand of man in coming to conclusions, he may be deceived in theoretical things, and from some imaginary hypothesis be carried away into false principles entirely opposed to what is true, which he can then confirm by fallacies and appearances of every kind. For false principles may be confirmed by appearances and fallacies to such a degree that a man may believe that they are truths themselves. I wish therefore now to produce some facts of experience, by which not only what has been said may be confirmed, but also by which everyone who is in the light of the mind, or who has natural ability, may draw conclusions as to many other things. In the natural kingdom, in which men are whilst they live in the world, and in the spiritual kingdom, where the spiritual angels are, and in the celestial kingdom, in which are the celestial angels, similar things appear, so much so that there is scarcely any other difference than that the like things in the spiritual kingdom are more perfect than in the natural kingdom, and in the celestial kingdom still more perfect than in the spiritual kingdom. A spirit or an angel appears like a man in the world, even so that he knows no otherwise than that he is a man of the world. He has a similar face and a similar body, and in the face similar eyes, nostrils, ears, lips, mouth, and similar hair, and in the body also a similar breast, abdomen, loins, hands, and feet, and also similar organs of generation. In a word, he is a man in external form altogether like the man of the world. He has similar lungs, because he breathes, and he has a similar heart, because it pulsates. The other interior viscera of the body are also similar, because there are societies in heaven which equally correspond to these viscera. There is likewise a ruddiness in the face, hands, arms, and body, as if from blood in the arteries and veins. There are also similar fibers, nerves, and muscles, because in like manner a spirit moves his limbs like a man in the world. Moreover, he has similar sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. He also has similar speech and singing. He has also a similar power of imagination, thought, intellect, and will, also affection and cupidity. In a word, an angel or a spirit is so similar to a man of the world that he himself knows no otherwise than that he is a man of the world. Conjugal love is also similar with all its effect. Moreover, there is not propagation, but in place of it, unition of minds, and thence an increase of intelligence and wisdom. Thence it is that in the word, in its spiritual sense, by marriage is meant the conjunction of truth and good, and by daughters good, and by sons truths, and so on. Their garments also are similar to the garments of men. They have tunics, mantles, breeches, stockings, shoes, caps, tiaras, and undergarments like those in the world, with some difference as to colors, especially of the tunics. The reason is because colors signify the appearances of truth from good, and garments signify truths, and hence the clothing of the understanding. They have similar houses, in which are apartments and chambers with courts, as in the world, and within there are tables, benches, utensils, and various decorations. In heaven there are palaces so magnificent that palaces in the world cannot be compared to them. These palaces are of a magnitude so great, and of such symmetrical and architectural beauty both without and within, and are decorated in such forms with gold and precious stones, that no picture painter on earth could possibly express them. There are also marble houses and houses of a blue color. The use of every apartment is known from its decorations. They have also similar food and drink as in the world, and various kinds of food and drink are named. In the spiritual world are likewise earths, mountains, hills, plains, grassy fields, paradises or gardens, groves, and woods. There are ways everywhere tending to various societies. Some are guarded. These ways then first appear to a spirit when he goes into his own society. There are also in that world fountains, lakes, and seas. There appear likewise animals of the earth, and all kinds of flying things, greater and smaller. There also appear compound animals, such as are described in the word. There are also various insects or worms. In a word, in the spiritual world there are not only similar things as in the natural world, but innumerable others, and everything exists with infinite variety and harmony, from which there breathes forth delight. In a word, in heaven there is a heaven in all and in each thing, in general and in every particular. Thus, every external sense has its own heaven, and everything of the internal sense has also its own heaven, and an angel is a heaven in its least form, and each one, as he has an angel in himself, has also heaven outside of himself. But it must be known that all things, and each now mentioned, are not material but spiritual, or are from a spiritual origin, and yet spirits know no otherwise than that they are material. The reason is that when what is spiritual touches or tastes what is spiritual, it is altogether like when what is material touches or tastes what is material. Concerning this appearance, I have often had a discussion with spirits, who believe that the things which they see and touch are material. I have shown them by various methods, and by various reasons, even to the life, that nothing in the spiritual world is material, but that everything there is spiritual. I demonstrated it to them by the houses, which in a moment are formed, and in a moment are destroyed and dissipated, also by their garments, which in a moment are put on, and in a moment are changed. New garments are also given in a moment. In like manner I have demonstrated it from their dinners and repasts, showing that the tables upon which is the food exist in a moment, and are afterwards dissipated in a moment, and that the spirits themselves can enter into the houses through the walls, and oftentimes not entering in through the doors. There was a certain individual known to me, with whom I conversed when his body which he had in the world was being buried, and I told him that he was now being buried, when he replied that he did not know what of him was being buried, because he had all things with him, a similar body as before, and other things similar, for he, like others, did not know otherwise than that he was still material, whereas he was spiritual. He was soon instructed that his material body, which he carried about with him in the world, and which then clothed his spiritual body, was being buried. Wonderful things concerning the language of spirits. Spirits and angels do not know otherwise than that they speak the same language they did in the world, write as they did in the world, and think as they did in the world, when yet they speak the spiritual language, in which there is no expression similar to any in the world, and they write by letters and characters, but it differs so much from writings in the world that there is nothing whatever that is similar, except the letters and some points. Yea, they think altogether otherwise than in the world, so differently that no thought is similar, but still they do not know otherwise than that all things are similar. That it is so I have often experienced by this, that spirits and angels, when they are with me, are in my natural state, and it was said to them that in their spiritual state they should speak words and sentences, and retain the words with me in the natural state, and then there was not a single word alike, nor did they understand one of their words. They likewise wrote a sentence in the spiritual state, and when it had been written it was shown in the natural state. There was nothing similar but the letters and points. Likewise, when they thought in the spiritual state, they could not bring forth any idea of thought in the natural state. As, for example, they say rocky, scopulosum, and to wish life, vitam velle. Scopulosum, in the spiritual language, signifies that he casts out of the doors, and vitam velle, that it is afar off. When they retain these expressions in the natural state, they do not understand them, nor any expression in the natural state when they come into the spiritual state. When they write scopulosum, they write ... and when they write vitam velle, they write ... and they suppose they have written it fully. They write the sense of the words by alphabetic letters, each one of which signifies a thing ... They write also by many signs, so that the greater the angelic wisdom is, the more things of wisdom they understand in the writing. The word is thus written. From these things it may be concluded that there is no ratio given by continuity between the natural and the spiritual, and that spirits and angels who are with men do not know that they are with them, nor an angel or a spirit that he is with a man. These wonderful things were disclosed to me before those in the spiritual world who were with me today, because they could be with me in my natural state and not before. It is altogether similar between the thought, speech, and writing of the angels of the Lord's celestial kingdom and of the angels of the spiritual kingdom, as there is between those who are in the spiritual kingdom in relation to those who are in the natural kingdom. This has also been confirmed by experience. The English. The garments of the English are not like their garments in the world, neither those of the virgins nor of the women. They are adapted altogether to their general affection. When viewed in the spiritual state, they appear graceful and beautiful, because they are altogether in agreement with their genius. But when the same are seen in their natural state, they do not appear so beautiful. The reason is that garments signify truths, and therefore all are clothed according to the reception of truth. In London there are 10 moderators of similar authority. The understanding teaches the will and does not lead it, or faith teaches, but does not produce good works. For man can discern and see what is good and evil, but still act contrary thereto, and then he either shuns it, or holds it in hatred. The will and the understanding is then opposite, yea, in time dissipates it. Truth seen is what one acknowledges, but this is not the truth of life. But what once becomes of the will is either good or evil. This is stirred up by the sight, and by the understanding, or the thought, and then the will is stirred up, and thence it exists in the thought. It is thus affected, in all things reborn. It then appears as if the will was aroused by the thought, but It is not so. It is as if the sight should teach the feet to walk cautiously, and the hands to do the work. It appears as if that leads, but it does not lead, but shows and teaches. It is altogether like the heart and the lungs. The lungs do not respire unless the heart also acts, nor can there be given a reciprocal conjunction from the lungs, but from the heart. It is to be observed that there may be anything either spiritual, moral, or civil, whose effect man has produced and thence has loved. The man hears it from another, or he reads it in a book. Thence it becomes his thought. In the thought there is raised up a perception of it, because this was the first of that thing. His affection is in the perception, thus the affection of truth. This affection, which is called the affection of truth, is from the affection of good, which is of the will. Thus, from the will, in the affection of truth, there is effected the conjunction of good and truth, in which conjunction the will and the understanding, or good and truth, act as one. Thus one is concealed in the other, within, and all are aroused from the ultimate, even through the hearing and sight, that is, the rousing up, namely because the will is concealed inmostly in the hearing, and thence in the thought, and it goes forth not otherwise than the spiritual sense and the celestial sense from the natural sense into the hearing, and thence sight is simultaneous. But it does not produce. Production is effected by the will, or the affection of good, into the affection of truth, thence into the perception, and from this into the thought, but not vice versa. From these things it is evident whence are appearances. Thought is also given from hearing, and within the thought is perception, and within the perception is the affection of truth, and not at the same time the affection of the good of that truth. The affection of its good can be given with the love of self, of reputation, honor, and gain, but this is not marriage, but adultery. The reason is that this good, which is merely natural, can be opposite to the good of truth itself, which is spiritual in various ways and respects. Examples may teach this. When man is in his natural good, which in itself is evil, he then either does not know that spiritual good, or denies it. He does so when he is in his proprium. There is given the affection of knowing and understanding truth on account of glory, gain, and remuneration. The love of knowing and understanding is the love of natural light. The love of knowing and understanding truths is the love of spiritual light, which love is especially given with those who are in the love of good, but it is also given with those who are in the love of glory. From experience, it has been given me to know that the love of light, on account of glory, as also of use, is given with those who are in the love of evil. But with them the love of evil is then hidden, or is lulled to sleep. It touches only the surface, as beauty from various colors, and the more it is hidden or lulled to sleep, the more it can feel delight. The love of knowing and understanding truths is from the external, which can be given provided the internal is hidden, or is lulled to sleep. But it is a spurious love. It is like some filthy object, covered over with a beautiful color, yea, with gold, underneath which surface there is evil. Therefore, when good is in evil, one cannot know and understand those things. Yea, he holds them in hatred, for he then confirms himself against truths. Thus the internal dissipates the external. Yea, there is given a holy external and a profane internal. The internal is lulled to sleep, but not the external. The external is not asleep. In the treatise on the 10 Commandments, it must treat of faith and of the understanding of truth. 1, what faith is. 2, that there is conjunction with good works, and there is so much of faith as there is life. 3, that life is the soul of faith. 4, that faith separate is not faith, it is inanimate. 5, it is the dragon, it is the he-goat, it is Philistia, it is Cain, it is Reuben. 6, what is faith? It is truth. 7, at this day how sterile is faith separate, and religion is nothing. In heaven they altogether reject the dogma that the understanding is to be held under obedience to faith. All things of theology can be comprehended by the understanding. Not only by the spiritual understanding by the angels, but by the rational understanding by men. Otherwise, from theological authority, they could say whatever they wished. Foods. There were some in the lowest heaven, to whom the atmosphere above appeared like water. I spoke with them, and they said that they have choice foods, and they take them from the table and keep them until evening, and eat therefrom at will, but it is not allowed them to hide them until morning. This is what is meant in the Lord's Prayer, "Give us daily bread." Concerning the manna, it is said that it bred worms when it was kept. Then they were to burn up what was left of the paschal lamb, neither should they let anything from the sacrifices remain over, also that the bread of faces should be replaced anew every day. Thence it is evident why everyone is provided with spiritual daily bread by the Lord, and that it is not given as their own, and thus there should be no care concerning tomorrow, what they should eat and drink. Thus and not otherwise are good spirits in their works, and in their life and faith. Nothing is given to the evil, but only to him who is in work. Thus also all are held in bonds. Thus every use is remunerated. Some are nourished at the tables of others, but those who are evil and hateful sit at the table and do not see the food. Marriage and adultery. Adultery is hell itself. Thus it is the devil himself and Satan. It has been shown by many things, as also by experience, that all in hell are adulterers, that they rage like furies when they perceive conjugal love, which is a sign that they are from hell, that they desire to violate chaste marriages, and many other things, than that they are in the marriage of evil and falsity. Marriage is heaven itself, because all there are in conjugal love, every one in his own degree. That love is the fundamental love of all the loves of heaven, because an angel by it becomes love in form, because they who are in marriage are in good and truth, and therefore heaven cooperates in marriages and nuptials, and hell in adulteries and whoredoms. Thence it follows that as far as a man detests adulteries as a diabolic sin and looks to the Lord, so far he is in a like degree in heaven. Marriage and adultery must be treated of especially, because he who is in marriage is in the conjunction of good and truth, but he who is in adultery is in evil and falsity. And because adultery is all sin against the Decalogue, for he who is in that is in all the evil of the Decalogue, and vice versa, and because these are involved, and as it were contained in marriage, and adultery in summaries, therefore they must be treated of especially. At this day in the Christian world, adulteries are more prevalent than in any other religion, because they separate good from truth, or charity from faith, and when these are separated, then from influx it cannot be otherwise. Therefore they confirm adulteries and not marriages, and therefore it is not known what conjugal love is. It must be shown how the faith of the present day separates, and thus falsifies the word, then how it perverts man's rational. Thence adulteries are delightful, but not so marriages. Adulteries are the worst of all abominations, because the seed of man is his life, which is conjoined with the life of the wife, so that they are not two but one flesh. But when the lives of many men are emitted into one woman, there becomes such foulness that on account of the abomination it cannot be described. It becomes such before the angels. To do goods, and not to fight against evils, is to do goods from self and not from the Lord. It is believed by many that they will be saved because they have done goods, as they have given to the poor, benefited their neighbor, acted sincerely and justly in their duty and work, and yet have never fought against the evils opposed to their goods, believing that thus evils are removed. It appears to them, moreover, as if goods removed evils, saying in heart, "If I do good, then I shall avoid evil." Nevertheless, the case is as follows: that such a one does good from obedience to the precepts of the Lord, yet not from the Lord but from himself, thus not from any spiritual law, except only apparently, but from a moral and civil law actually. In this case his evils nevertheless remain, for although he does not do them, yet he is not averse to them. Consequently, when the love of evil with its delight returns, he does not resist the evil, but either excuses it and does it, or omits doing it on account of himself and the world. Moreover, he does not then know that it is evil. The case is otherwise when he fights against evil from the spiritual law, for in so far as he does this, he censures evil, and he then loves good and its truth, and in proportion as he does good from the Lord, and not from himself, in the same proportion the Lord, by the good and truth in the man, removes his evils. I have heard spirits saying that they know no otherwise than that to do good is to shun evil. But they receive for reply that in this case they no otherwise shun evil than that they do not do it, but that nevertheless they do not hold evil in hatred and reject it as sin, unless as far as they have fought against it. By fighting against it, evil is removed, and then good succeeds. That is, by combat, the devil is removed, and the Lord enters. To do good, and not to fight against evil, is to do good only in externals, and not in internals. But to fight against evil, and thus to do good, is to do good in internals. Man is not made spiritual except by combat. Some of those who have been sincere, just, chaste, and have not fought against what is insincere, unjust, and unchaste, are after death let into combats, and then it clearly appears how much they have done good from themselves, or on account of themselves, or from the Lord, and by combats they are reformed. Before this they do not come into the affection of truth, nor their hearts into the perception and knowledge of it, nor are they taught what is evil and what is good. Their former state is thus one of ignorance. Man does good from obedience, and he does good also from affection. He does good from obedience before he has fought against evil. This is the first state of man, and it may be a state of reformation. And he who is in this state, and does not do evils, is regenerated in the other life by combats against them, or by temptations. To do good from affection takes place only when man has fought against evils. This is the state of man's regeneration, and this state is the inverse of the former. To do good from obedience is not from freedom, because not from affection. In it there is the thought of reward, and consequently afterwards of merit. No one can do good from himself. It is the Lord with man who does the good, and no one comes to the Lord but he who removes evils from himself by combats against them. Hence it is that in proportion as any one thus removes evils, in the same proportion he does good from the Lord. And this good appears in like manner as if it were done by the man. But nevertheless the man always thinks of the Lord, and the angels have a perception that it is from the Lord. In proportion as man shuns evils as sins, in the same proportion he does good not from himself but from the Lord. In proportion as man shuns evil, in the same proportion his works become works of charity. The delight from the glory of being wise, and the delight of commanding. I have sometimes seen that when they were in the delight of the love of ruling, they acted like foolish persons, believing then that they were wiser than others. But when they turned about, they were led back into their understanding. They then saw that they had been foolish. But because they more greatly loved that former delight which was foolish, and turned themselves continually to that foolishness, they then seemed to be in that wisdom, thus by turns, and still their understanding could not lead them back, but the will led. Concerning this, many may be named from experience, as Charles XII, Benz, and others. This is a manifest sign that the will acts into the understanding, and not the understanding into the will. Nor is it so that they are converted by the Lord in the understanding by an influx of light into the voluntary, and that they are converted by hell to the delight of the will. The Ten Commandments. As far as man fights against evils as sins, and shuns evils as sins, so far the works which he does are goods, and so far they are charity. As far as a man shuns evils as sins, so far his spiritual mind is opened. So far his life becomes spiritual moral. So far he is in heaven, thus in the Lord, and the Lord is in him. So far he comes into the light of heaven, thus into the affection of truth on account of the truth. So far he is being regenerated and is regenerated. So far the order is inverted, and he acts from the will of good, and as if from the understanding. So far he is purified by truths. So far hereditary evil is removed. So far he increases in intelligence and wisdom. Many similar things from the heavenly doctrine, where it treats of what is meant by truths. This is done successively, and afterwards to eternity. So far he has faith. The Last Judgment. What the Last Judgment is? The Last Judgment has been effected 3 times. The Last Judgment was effected and is effected by the Lord from firsts by ultimates. The Last Judgment could not have been effected the second time unless he himself had come into the world, and by that as in firsts, be also in ultimates. Without the Last Judgment effected by him, thus, without his coming into the world, no one of mortals could have been saved. Unless the Lord had glorified his human, even to its ultimates, no Last Judgment could be effected at this day. Thus hereafter no one could be saved. After the Last Judgment a new church is always to be established, and is established, and before the Last Judgment it could not be, nor can it be. Therefore it is predicted in the Apocalypse that the New Jerusalem will descend from heaven after the Last Judgment, by which is meant the new church. No one is received in that church, thus in heaven after this, except he who acknowledges God, one in person and essence, in whom is the Trinity, thus the Lord, and, unless by some combats, he has removed and shunned evils as sins against the divine laws. The English. The English have a double theology, one for the learned and one for the unlearned. The preachers compose their discourses so that the learned understand their theology, and the unlearned theirs, and this is done from a certain fear on account of reputation, and favor on both sides. To the question whether they believe that the theology for the unlearned is true, they reply that they do not know otherwise, when they utter that prayer in their temples, but not so when they compose their discourses. It is then said to them that the reason they do not know otherwise at that time is from influx out of heaven, and that it is not so when they compose their discourses is from influx from their proprium, because they then think concerning themselves, their own learning, and fame and favor therefrom. The 10 Commandments. 10 articles, what is effected with man when he fights against evils as sins, as before. Then the commandments of the Decalogue, where the evils are named which are sins, against which one must fight. Then of the spiritual, which is then given to him, and in which he also comes, there is the spiritual there in every precept. What charity is, it is to do uses, everyone in his own function. What faith out of charity is, and what faith from charity is. Something concerning faith separated from charity, what its quality is when man is in it both as to life and doctrine. Observations concerning faith. In a particular small work, faith will be treated of, thus concerning faith separated from charity, after the work on the Last Judgment, in which all things will be described by articles, which are, 1, what charity and faith are, 2, one cannot be separated from the other. There is no charity where there is no faith, and there is no faith where there is no charity. 3. As far as there is one, so far there is the other, in equal degree and in equal quality. 4. Faith is truth. 5. Faith does not produce charity, but charity faith. Before there is charity, those things which are supposed to be of faith are only knowledges without life. 6. Faith without charity is not possible. Faith without charity is no religion. Faith without charity falsifies the word. Faith without charity blinds all the understanding of truth. It is the end of the church when there is not the faith of charity. Every church ends in Babylon, and in faith separate. Faith separate from charity is predicted in the Apocalypse, and is meant by the dragon and his two beasts. Faith without charity is meant by the he-goat in Daniel and in Matthew. Faith without charity is meant by Philistia. Faith without charity is meant by Cain. Faith without charity is meant by Reuben. Faith from charity, also faith without charity, is meant by Peter. Charity is meant by James, and the works of charity by John. The quality of the faith of the present day is to be presented, such as it is, and the degrees of justification such as they are. They are to be described briefly, and that it is the whole of theology at the present day, also that if it is confirmed, there arise many falsities, but not if it is not confirmed. The will is double, spiritual, and natural. Knowledges are the storehouses of faith. All things of faith can be seen. Falsities of faith are not faith. Faith is truth. Faith. The Lord from eternity, who is Jehovah, came into the world that he might effect the last judgment, and at the same time glorify his human, and without this no mortal could have been saved, and they are saved who believe in him and do good from him. This is the faith of the New Jerusalem. As far as faith is separated from the goods of charity, it differs from that faith. Let him explore it who is able. Faith separate supposes, 1, that God the Father and God the Son are two, both from eternity. 2. It supposes that God the Son came into the world, from the will of God the Father, that he might make satisfaction for the human race, otherwise from the divine justice, which they also call vindictive, it would have perished in eternal death. 3. It supposes that satisfaction was made by the Lord's fulfilling the law and by the passion of the cross. 4. It supposes that the mercy of God the Father was on account of those things of the Son. 5. It supposes imputation, the ascription of his merit to them who are in that faith, and who from it pray to the Father to have mercy for the Son's sake. 6. It supposes the justification of those who pray from trust and confidence. It supposes the operation of the Holy Spirit with them. It supposes the remission of all sins with them, and thus salvation. 9. It supposes that then they will have an endeavor to do good, which deeply hidden operates, but not manifestly, and moves the will of the man. Others, whom they believe to be less learned, suppose a manifest operation. 10. But most of those who confirm themselves in that faith suppose that no one can do good from himself which is good, unless it is meritorious, thence that no good work saves, but faith alone. They say nothing about evil, and about good of life, nor do they think of it. Some suppose that the influx of faith is instantaneous, and also that it is given in the last hour of death, and that their salvation is by faith alone, howsoever they have lived. They suppose that there is something of temptation, and that liberation is by that faith. In a summary, that God the Father sent the Son to make satisfaction for the human race, and that they who believe in him are saved from his merit. They divide into parties concerning instantaneous salvation by faith and vindictive justice. Their books are full of these things, but they write confirmations of these subjects only. Faith places the understanding under obedience to this faith, and he does not understand what the truth of faith is. The Moravians. I spoke with them of their brotherhood, whether it is of love or charity, They said no, but only of friendship, because they are of one opinion. They do not admit the expression of love and charity in religion.